So today's been my first day at the prison and it's been a really surreal experience. We promptly arrived at the prison at 12:30. We each handed in our passport and had our photo taken for our identification visitation pass. I was surprised that we didn't have to do any security checks. They just told us make sure you've got no contraband on you, make sure your phones and everything are in your bags. The staff very kindly kept their bags in the main reception area because they were too big to go in the lockers. So yeah, I was surprised there was no security checks. So we got through fairly quickly and we were waiting for Christine to come down and collect us. She works in the textile studio and she'll be working with us over the course of the next 7 weeks. First impressions of her, she's a really nice woman. She was very friendly, very welcoming. We made our way over to the staff canteen and as we walked there, we walked past the textile studio and on the opposite side was a really beautiful garden. It had 2 or 3 ponds, loads of flowers, a bench, a hedgehog sanctuary, a war memorial. It was just not something that I was expecting to see within a prison, and it was really nice to see. It's a beautiful thing to look at. The inmates look after it very well, and aesthetically it's very pleasing and it's calming. As we entered the main building, it was just like walking into a school. It just felt very school-like. The flooring, the colour of the walls. There was lots of sort of motivational posters around, posters of success stories, vocational courses, things, if you need help or counselling because you've got drug or substance abuse or anything like that. Yeah, it was just lots of information on the walls in sort of poster format. When we entered the staff canteen, everyone sort of was looking at us what are you doing here? But we got our food. The food was surprisingly very good. I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting that. The inmates, they cook the food for us. They're doing a vocational course, so you sort of get there should be a lot of variety over the next couple of weeks. As we sat down to eat and I was able to sort of absorb my surroundings, it just felt very surreal. There was a really weird juxtaposition between prison, the bars and the locked doors, and this rustic sort of dinery. So for instance, the windows all had bars on and halfway down was white netting. They had vine, fake flower vines on the walls. There was a vintage cabinet at the back of the room. They had little flowers in the middle of the table. It was very nice. And, thinking back, it's probably because it helps that's their time, that's the staff's time to forget that they're in prison. They don't need to be on guard, they can relax. So I think they're trying to make that space inviting and calm. During lunch, Christine told us that we would be working in the studio today. So after we'd eaten, we made our way there. I was just feeling really excited. Didn't know what to expect at all. We started setting out the room and sorting out bits and bobs, and we were sort of, talking about what we'd be doing today. Christine then said that she was off to go get the inmates, and at that point I really started to feel nervous. I was like, what's this going to be like? How am I going to do this? But yeah, and then the men walked in, and then I felt, you know, I did feel a little bit intimidated at first. You know, there was a lot of them. There was like 35 guys, I think. They weren't all going to be working on the Makeright programme. 10 of those were on the Makeright programme. The other guys were just working, sewing and all sorts of things, because they make sofa parts for DFS. They make all the curtains and the bed sheets and the wash bags, etc. for the prison. So it's a busy working environment. Anyway, the inmates who were working with the Makeright programme came over. They were all very friendly. They were calling us Miss, which I didn't really like. I was like, I'm not Miss, just call me Sophie. You know, it was weird. But they were polite and respectful. The first thing we did was brief introduction, say our name, say an interesting fact. I just said that I was an interaction designer. You know, I wasn't really interested about that, but hey ho. And then we got paired up. There was a volunteer with an inmate and whatnot. And it was the constant gaze portrait. So it's an icebreaker challenge, and what you have to do is you have to stare into your partner's eyes and draw them, but you're not allowed to take your pen off the paper. It's quite an intimate activity, and yeah, I felt a little bit uncomfortable. I do think it's very uncomfortable to stare into someone's eyes that you don't know. However, it did do exactly what it was supposed to. It did break the ice because it gives you a mutual talking point, like, oh God, isn't this awkward? And not just a mutual talking point between you and your partner, but also everyone around, because everyone's experiencing the same thing and probably feeling the same thing. We then got on to our first task, and this was creating a persona. The persona is going to be something really important for this process, and something that we will continue to refer back to throughout the duration of the programme. So the inmates, they had to choose a name, an age, just make up this character, think of things that they like, dislike, hobbies, family, you know, really get in depth and get to know this person. From that point, they were then given loads and loads of sheets of paper that had all different images on, and what they needed to do was create a visual representation of their character through these items. So like, for instance, a builder, he might have a pair of big chunky work boots. Why? Well, he's a builder, he wants to keep his feet safe, da 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 da. So like I said, I worked with David again for this task, and it got off to a fairly good start. You know, we wrote out his persona and it was good, and then it got to the choosing the images. He was sort of fixated on the jackets. He'd chosen like 3 or 4 and was asking my opinion on another one. And I was conscious that actually he was just choosing items that he liked, because when I said to him, you know, how does this relate to your character? He didn't really have an answer. It was just like, oh, I like it. And that's not really the purpose of the task. So, taking on board what Lorraine had said about the fact that sometimes you might have to, you know, redirect them, I decided to redirect him. So I got the sunglasses, I pulled a sheet out and it had sunglasses on it, and I was like, oh, you know, paraphrase, but you know, oh, what about this? You know, it's why don't we look at sunglasses? And instantly, this totally threw him. I was just like, oh God, what have I just done? It totally threw him. I think he thought that I was telling him what he was doing was wrong. That wasn't the case. I was just trying to say, you know, we've not got all day, let's look at something else. It's not about just the clothing. But yeah, it didn't really work at all. It totally threw him for the rest of the class. He never got back on board and as focused as he was, and I felt pretty terrible about the whole situation. Later, when we debriefed, I did, mention this to Lorraine and Roger and, wider team, and they suggested that in future, instead of being vocal, I should do it through sort of like body language and do my own thing, because it's important to remember that this is a co-creation project, so I don't have to oversee everything he does. I can actually do my own thing as well. So in future I would redirect him by doing my own thing and then asking his opinion. I think that would be a better way to approach it. Our last task of the day was to create a draft of a brief. This was not only challenging for David but also myself. This sheet I'd not seen prior to when we did the activity, so I had no idea what was on it, and to be honest, it was quite difficult to understand. I think the men struggle with the terminology that we often use because they're not, to us it's just what it is, but to them, they might not have ever heard that word before, they might not fully understand what we're on about, and to be frank, I didn't really understand what we were doing with that sheet. I think in future it would be really beneficial for students to actually have any sort of sheets like that, documentation prior, so that they can look at it, have a go themselves, so that when an inmate does need help, you can actually help them. That's what we're there for, after all. What else? I think that's about it. Oh yeah, at the end of the session, inmates were asked to, if any of them wanted to talk about their persona. And one of the lads, Danny, he was explaining his persona. Lauren, busy working woman. I'll just note, he was the only one that chose a woman. The other guys chose a guy. So, yeah, that was interesting. As he was explaining his idea, I was quite upset because the other inmates were sort of taking the piss out of him and talking over him. I just think it's really rude, that's not what we're there for. We're there to support each other. Yeah, have a laugh, but support each other, and when each other's talking, shh, and listen, But luckily, that didn't deter him, and I think that shows tenacity to be berated and still continue. So that was really positive. The end of the session. Oh, yeah, throughout the, we were doing the task, other inmates were coming over to see what we were doing. The environment was very intimate, it was very claustrophobic, it wasn't really a nice space to work in, it was difficult to hear because it's very loud in there. So it isn't the best, unless we're actually sewing, that probably isn't the best place for us to be. There's just so many distractions going on. One of the inmates actually, during the coffee break, came over and spoke to me. He asked, he actually started calling me Squirrel, quite funny, because I've got like a fur trim around my hood. Kind of a little bit creepy, but he told me that he wanted to cut the fur off and take it back to his cell, and I was a little bit like, please don't. I actually like my fur hood. But yeah, that was kind of funny. He then put me on the spot. Lorraine had told us to expect that the inmates will ask us why we're there, what we're doing. And he did, and I told him, curiosity, when I want to make a difference, I want to help somebody. And he was a little bit pessimistic, and probably quite rightly so. He made a valid point. He said, these men that you're working with have been in and out of prison, how is this course going to be any different to any of the others? And to be honest, I didn't really have an answer. In my head, of course I have loads of answers, but when I was put on the spot like that, I just couldn't articulate anything. Luckily, somebody else came along and said something, so there wasn't that sort of pin-dropping moment. But yeah, I felt caught off guard. Yeah, very kindly, the inmates made us all a little wash bag for a little keepsake, which I thought was brilliant. I love that kind of thing, and the fact that we've got something to keep is really special. So yeah, I left feeling really positive, really excited to go back. I was just really pleased that I decided to do this. And I think it's going to be really brilliant over the next few weeks. So yeah, looking forward to it.